Hey everyone, how are you today? My name is Judy May Murphy. For those of you who are here for the first time, you're very welcome, and welcome back to everybody else. Alrighty, so I just wanted to do this one really quickly. The light's fading here, so I'm just kind of racing against time a little bit to make sure that we get to chat today. That's why I'm all hippie style on the floor, like my little yogi self is coming out. So today we're going to talk about the fact that you so often feel so hurt. Right? And a lot of people, when they talk about feeling hurt, they keep it in the realm of friends, family, or particularly romantic relationships. But we don't often think about the fact that hurt can close us down business-wise. That if we're feeling that we just have been slammed by somebody, somebody has just taken what we thought was our worth and just screwed it up in a little ball and thrown it away, it can really eat into not just how we feel, but how we function, as the two are just inextricably linked. So I remember there's been times in my life where that has happened. I was involved way in the early days. I've got quite a few books out there with different publishers, and it wasn't actually a publisher of mine, but it was somebody else that I was in business with at the time. And I did something that I was perfectly within my rights to do. I went and I created something that I was perfectly within my rights to create, and they got so angry because it wasn't what they had planned for me. I had been helping them to do some stuff, and they thought I would just endlessly help them, and they lost it. They started yelling at me. They started pressing every button that they knew I had. Judy May, I thought you were a sincere person. I thought that you were about living a life of service. I thought that, you were a person who kept your promises. I mean, they had my buttons, and they pressed every single one of them. And I felt so hurt, so just awful, that I didn't do a lot work-wise for about 6 months. That's how long. And you can relate to this, I'm sure, that there's times when you haven't gone for promotions, you haven't gone for the job that you've wanted, you haven't gone for a sale, you haven't created a product, you haven't got the learning that you need. And it's simply because somebody squished you like a bug. That's how it felt, right? That they just took everything that you think is awesome about you and that is awesome about you, and they just decided to annihilate that. And how can we make sure that that isn't going to happen? Because there's a large part of us that is protecting against that, and it's stopping us from moving forward into new projects. It's stopping us from asking for sales. It's stopping us doing the things that we need to do to live our most extraordinary life. And it's unfair because we didn't initiate this. We just showed up in good faith. Maybe we made a mistake, or, we didn't do something that was deserving of that annihilation. But the more we learn about things like narcissism and histrionics and borderline and, all those things, then we'll start to understand that it never was about us. It really wasn't. And that we can then just sort of feel bored with it or slightly fascinated. These days, if a narcissist wades in and says something, I'm just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. The other day, actually, I was doing this talk to 8,000 people. It was an online thing that a colleague of mine, who's also a speaker, had set up, and it rocked. It was a short, half-hour thing, and got great feedback, and did the job, was feeling really good about it, and was reading through, because I really do care that this stuff is working for you guys. So I was reading through some of the comments, and most of them were very specific. They were like, okay, this resonated with me when you said this. I liked this. That's what I like about my feedback. It tends to be, and you can see as you read it below, it tends to be quite specific. People are like, okay, we're doing the critical thinking. We're not just it's not just great big hugs. It's great big hugs too, but it's great big hugs plus critical thinking. So this one guy, though, he said something like, oh, you guys, you speakers, you motivational people, you're all the same, entitled, or no, wasn't it entitled? He just had all this stuff to say. I can't even remember exactly what it was. And then he finished with, and hiding yourself behind so much makeup, who do you think you are? It's just like, well, I'm someone who likes to wear makeup because guess what? Like most women, I look better with it, right? So, and it was nothing. And I concocted a reply. My response, whereas years ago, even maybe 7 years ago, I would have fallen apart and not done anything on video again, and started to really question, am I not sincere? Am I doing this wrong? Instead, I was just like, oh gosh, this poor man, he's in a lot of pain. And I started to create a reply, and I'm like, oh no, actually, I know that this won't do anything. You know this about these kind of people. They're not gonna, people who have NPD. This guy was like vicious. There's no way that there was any reason. You got to stop reasoning with unreasonable people. So I just kind of cut it out and then just said to the person who organized the event, I was like, hey, this happened. I don't know what your procedure is, but just wanted to flag it for you. And they were like, oh my gosh, we don't tolerate that, and they just blocked him. Okay, so but the most important thing isn't that I was able to function for long enough to have a response that wasn't just a reactive closing down of me, but the fact that it didn't hurt. And this is what I want you to get is it doesn't have to keep hurting. You will learn things and it will stop hurting one day. You won't have to work so hard to defend yourself and, internally make it okay and be able to, do radical self-care to get yourself back. You won't have to do that. That time waster, that energy waster, that life waster will go, and you got to get yourself there. So how are you going to get there? Well, again, I have to find 5 different things that we're going to be able to do, that we're going to be able to action. So the first thing is when we develop a sense of self. Because usually the reason that we can just be taken out at the ankles by people is because there's not enough sense of us existing as an entity outside of others. We look to others. We have a history of looking to others for who we are. Am I a good girl? Am I a good boy? Am I dutiful? Do I please you? Am I doing this right? Am I getting this perfect? Am I all these different ways that we have that are extrinsic, outside of ourselves, ways of defining ourselves. That's how we see ourselves. We don't see ourselves by being able to just look in a mirror or just feel ourselves. It's just through reflection from what's around us. How am I doing? How am I doing? Can you tell me how I'm doing? And then when someone says, well, this is how you're doing, we believe it. All right, so developing a sense of self. So how do we develop a sense of self? We just look at preferences is the first thing. What do I prefer? In the movie Runaway Bride, the whole thing is, this isn't a massive spoiler, the whole thing is she doesn't know how she likes her eggs done. In each of her relationships, she had her eggs like scrambled, poached, fried, boiled, according to the man she was with. And she went and she worked out what kind of eggs does she like. I won't tell you, I'll let you watch the movie. But she had to work that out, what kind of eggs. So sometimes it can be as simple as that. We don't have a sense of self, or we know what we like, but we think it doesn't count. So for years, I used to think that, reading classic novels, drinking green tea, wrapping up in a blanket, going to history, art galleries like art museums, writing poetry, I used to think that those things somehow didn't count, that they were weaker and less than, and unless I was like wakeboarding, skiing backwards down a mountain, singing an aria, that somehow I wasn't an actual person. But getting that sense of just what do I prefer, and then believing that and seeing that as valid. Hey, it's your preference, it is valid. You like making cupcakes, great, that counts, that's valid, right? You like, if you are more introverted, you probably like things that are more solitary. And yet you have this idea that you should be liking parties. No, the first way to get a sense of self is get really honest about what are your preferences? What do you like? And if you can't think what do you like, just take 2 things and say, right, if I had to choose between these 2 things, if I said to you, what kind of car do you like? I don't know what kind of car I like. Well, I do actually, it's Morgan's. But it took me a long time to get to that point. But I used to think, okay, well, yeah, it's a Porsche Boxster. Like, yeah, that's cool. Who couldn't like that? But I didn't really want it. I just thought that that's what I should want, and that's what people would expect me to want. And people would say things like, oh yeah, I can see you in that. And so that was my car of preference. But if you said to me, what would you prefer, a Porsche Boxster or an Aston Martin? I'd say Aston Martin. If you say to me today, Judy May, what would you prefer, a Porsche Boxster or a Tesla? I'd be like, a Tesla, because it's, for the environmental reasers and the futuristic reasons, probably a Tesla. You say, Judy May, what would you prefer, a Tesla or a Morgan? I prefer a Morgan. I love those Morgan three-wheelers. I'd take it like a 1950s version of that with its beautiful oak panel. I'd take that in a heartbeat. I've got more of a sense of who I am, and those things count. So just get a sense of who you are through working out what your preferences are. I asked someone the other day, it was a new client, and they said, where in the world would you like to be? What are some of the places you just want to go? And she was just like, oh, I don't travel. I'm like, I know you don't. And part of the reason you don't travel is because you haven't yet worked out what are your preferences. And so we started with hot or cold. We started with busy, not busy. We started with city, countryside, all those things. So work out your preferences, and then you start to hone it down to, if you're not in a relationship that you love, it's probably because you haven't worked out and you're casting your net too wide. And once you work out, hey, you know what, I need someone who is quiet, who is introvert, who is better than I am at math. Just get very, very specific on what you like in people and what you need. And then once you have that sense of self, someone then turns and shines this image of you onto you, and you're like, yeah, no, you know what, that doesn't tally with my image of myself as an adventurer, as an explorer of the mind, as a whatever it is that you've met yourself as. You're kind of like, no, you can't really be talking about me because that's not me. You've got it wrong. And you can have some objective distance at that point. So that's point number one for working out, how is it that you can stop getting so hurt by people. Point number two is when we learn to question. When we simply ask the question, is that true? Because again, through habit, through conditioning, through past life experiences, we've just taken on other people's truth as truth. So if you've been in a narcissistic relationship, and supposing it was a guy, and women can be equally narcissistic, the guy came and said, I'll be home at 8:00, and you said, great, I'll have dinner ready, because you're a little chef people pleaser like I was for years. And so then he shows up at 8:00, or shows up at 10:00, and you say, I thought you said you were going to be home at 8. And he says, no, I never said that. And rather than wondering, why are they lying? You're kind of like, oh, did I get it wrong? Or, you tend to believe what is said to you. And you trust other people's version of reality. So the first one is about you're trusting other people's version of you because you don't have a version of you. This one's about you're trusting other people's version of reality simply because you haven't learned how to stand up for your version of reality. And that really is about questioning, about saying, well, hold on a second, is that true? It really is from that question. That question really covers all of it. Is that true? Is that necessarily true for me? Is that necessarily true for me right now? Just because getting on board this idea of your truth, or got a little piece of fluff from one of the cushions. Is this my truth? Is this your truth for now? Is this my truth for now? Like realizing that truth isn't a set thing, and it certainly is not the prerogative of the other person. That you get to say, well, that's why, sometimes it's kind of a cliche, that thing, well, my truth, speak your truth. And the phrase used to annoy me a little bit just because it was so overused, but I can see the value in it. That it's like, well, yeah, this idea of our experiences aren't the same. How can they be? We're two completely different people looking at something from completely different viewpoints. And, the thing you got to do is you got to question that, and having some just really great questioning phrases, or some phrases that remind you that when someone says something that really hurts you, so we're talking about things that are everything from like a vicious attack, even to something that you feel defensive about. So something like, you said you'd have that report finished. It's not a vicious attack, but you might think, well, did I? Okay, you heard that. So the first thing you can do is you can assert their reality. You don't have to assert yours first of all. You can, if they're a reasonable person, you don't want them getting all defensive, you can say, okay, so I understand that you were expecting that report through something that I said. Right. So either I miscommunicated to you, or I'm not remembering right, or for whatever reason. And I love using the phrase for whatever reason, because in my brain, when I'm saying for whatever reason, I'm really saying, or because you messed up. That's what's going on in my head in that moment. Or for whatever reason, we've had this miscommunication. But if someone's actually hurting you by saying something vicious, something that you now know because you got a sense of self isn't true about you, you can say, oh, that's really interesting. I don't see it that way. Yeah, I don't see it that way. Or I can't get behind that statement. Or wow, that's fascinating that you would say that. Or you know what, I'm going to have to go away and think about that. Any of those just very simple phrases will buy you enough time that you can get away. And because as we know, when we're on our own, particularly those of us who are introverted, who, we repower when we're away from other people. It's because, and often there's an overlap between, this is where the overlap between HSP, highly sensitive person, and introvert is the biggest, because you don't have to, if you're one, you're not necessarily the other. But this is where they overlap, is when you get too much sensation coming at you, when you're just experiencing too much, you then need to withdraw in order to recover, in order to be able to think clearly. So it's very, very important that we take that space and time in order to work out, well, what is my truth here? And don't try and have the conversation with the person in the moment. Just hang up the phone. If someone's just being belligerent, just hang up and walk away. Say, listen, I'll be back later. Even I just need to go to the bathroom, and just sit there in the stall and go, what is even going on, right? So take that time and take that space, so that the second point can be taken care of, where we learn to question the reality that they've got going on, and sort of is this okay? Rather than, our usual questions that we have going on, like, how can I make them okay? Or how can I make the situation okay? It's like, how am I feeling about this? Is this okay for me? Is this what my experience of this is as well? Or is it something else? And then something like, what, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Again, an old cliche, but just kind of useful. Just sort of like, you can stop trying to convince me. You can stop trying to make me come over to your side, because I'm just not there. And that's just an awesome boundary to be able to set. The next thing is when we learn to stay filled up. Because again, another reason that we get hurt is because we're not filled up either intrinsically or extrinsically enough within ourselves and outside of ourselves enough that we can lose a person, or we can lose some approval. So if you have someone who usually approves of you, and then suddenly they disapprove of you, it can hurt. You can feel really sad suddenly. And so if you've got enough ways of you that you make you feel good, and that other healthy people around you making you feel good, then one person suddenly kicking off and being very displeased with you isn't going to be such a big catastrophe. So let's suppose that you've got 20 people in your life, you being one of them, and all 20 people are doing a pretty good job of making you feel great, and then one person, because they're more narcissistic, they suddenly, when you do something that doesn't agree with their agenda or their idea of how things should be, they suddenly withdraw all their approval. That's okay, you still got 19 out of 20 units of approval. And in fact, the units of approval that are coming from you should count for even more, should be even bigger. But for now, let's just look at it that way. Be filled up enough with enough people that you've got somewhere to run to, because that's what we do. Like, we get hurt and we go to someone who we know is a safe place. So have enough people who are safe places that we don't even need to run to them. I used to just go running to my friends all the time when the slightest thing happened, and now I'm just much better at not needing to do that. I will still do it. I will still ask for the support and expect it to be there, but I just don't need it because of the way that I've set the game up. So the next thing then is, after learning to stay filled up, let's just recap. So developing a sense of self, learning how to question someone else's reality, and staying filled up all the time. Other examples of staying filled up might be something as simple as not overworking, making sure that we are getting entertained. Let's imagine that you watch a movie. That movie becomes like part of your support system, your internal support system. It's just kind of like, oh, that was really cool, and you're relating to the characters, or you're reading a book and you're getting the same thing. So have a full environment that supports you, not just like one go-to person or one therapist. Create. We'll do another video on that, definitely. I'm so excited to do that. That's a huge thing that I love to teach, is how do we have an environment that fully supports us. All right, so the fourth thing then is when you learn how to talk back, to your internal critic that joins in. Okay, because we do have this internal critic that is aligning with that person. We can see a little bit of truth in that. So let's imagine someone comes along and they call us lazy, and we know that we just do so much stuff for so many people all the time. Stop doing that. But we know that we are like the very opposite of lazy, and yet there's a part of us that thinks, well, what if I am? What if I am lazy? What if I used to be lazy, or sometimes I'm, what is lazy, right? Lazy is you need to take time out for whatever reason, either because you think it's not worth doing, or you think someone else will do it, or you think it'll be more fun to do this other thing. So, hey, lazy is even just, parts of your brain trying to look after you. But if you take it as like a big insult, if you take it as, this is against my identity to be called lazy, then you're going to do everything that you can to not be called lazy. So if someone calls you lazy, the part of you, the internal critic that comes on board and sort of says, yeah, you are, he has a point, she has a point, you can be really lazy. We've got to learn how to talk back to that. And say, look, you know what? For the most part, you do a really good job. You work hard enough, more than hard enough. There's so much that's going on. You're healing right now. You're creating a new business right now. You're learning all these new things. You're doing okay. It doesn't matter that there's a part of you that can identify as lazy sometimes. We all have that. Okay, so making sure that you're talking back to your inner critic. The next thing is when we can set it up ahead of time so we can stop being so naive about other people's intentions. Because we often think that other people's intentions for us are similar to our intentions for them. And when our intention is that people will have a great life and feel supported and feel loved, and that they will be in partnership in a way that, everyone's fighting fair and doing things in a good and just way, and people are, doing their own thing, like they're, no one's taking advantage of anyone else. When we have that way of being around people, our presumption can be that other people don't mean us harm. But we've got to stop being so naive around that and realize, yeah, there are people who they just need to destroy you. That's just how it is, and you've got to get super good at spotting those. Again, future video, hopefully by the time you're watching this, those videos will be out, and they'll be in and around here somewhere that you'll be able to click on those and see them immediately. But for now, just realize that you can't go in with that presumption. So then you can't be so surprised and so taken out when someone is horrible to you. All right, we'll be talking all about the different reasons people are horrible, the different ways that they're horrible and all of that, but just realize that for any kind of hurt that you will feel, if you are going into a situation being ready for the fact that they're going to do whatever it takes. There are some people that will do whatever it takes to just get what they want. And sometimes it's quite simply that what they want is to make you feel shit about yourself so that they get to feel better about themselves. Sometimes what they want is they want to take your business. I've had so many people who they meet up with me, so many people in my industry, and they will meet up with me and they will immediately say, so Judy May, what are you working on right now? And I used to be so unboundaried around it. I used to be like, oh great, now I'm with a colleague and we're sharing all this stuff, and I'd say, oh, I'm doing this, I've created this great new way of describing this, and they go, oh, tell me about it, and I tell them all about it, and then they take it and they go teach it, and that was my fault for not being boundaried, for presuming that they wouldn't just take stuff and teach it as if it was their own. But that's on me. That is on me. So this is what we need to do, is we need to stop being so naive, expecting other people to show up with the same intentions that we have. So those are 5 ways that you can protect yourself from feeling hurt, and know that just as you start to build success, all these things will automatically start coming into place. As you start to build success, you get a greater sense of who you are. You get a greater sense of you and your reality as opposed to someone else's reality. You learn how to quiet your inner critic because you've got like some wins on board, and you can kind of be more balanced about stuff. You're automatically filling up on good adventures and maybe nice hotels and nice clothes and all those kind of things. So the great thing is that the 2 things go hand in hand. As you get less closed down, you can build more success. As you build more success, you tend to be stronger and in different ways, and less likely to get closed down by this hurt. And I can share that with you because that's a path that I've been on for the last many years, and it's just such a relief. Oh my goodness! I remember what it was like crying yourself to sleep at night over something silly someone said. That can be over, and it will be over for you if you're still there. All right, big hugs. Talk to you very, very soon. Take care.